I want to talk about conspiracy theories, but I don't want to necessarily talk about what's in conspiracy theories, especially what's not in any current conspiracy theories, because I think all of the newest conspiracy theories really suck. Really, really into the old retro ones, back whenever it was cool. Um, but specifically, I want to talk about how to think about conspiracy theories without going crazy. Conspiracy theories are often, I don't want to say worded, because one of the things about conspiracy theories is that often someone tells you their version of the theory and you find that out and then you go read up on it and there's all these different write-ups of it and different takes. So there's no one word for word canon version of a conspiracy theory usually. It's just kind of an idea on the street that people keep talking about. Um and conspiracy theories are very socially fueled. And so it's good to be able to actually talk about them, because if you meet up with somebody who is either into it or is talking about it, then this will allow you to actually have a conversation with them about it. You don't have to exit believing in whatever it is that they're talking about. Um, but you could exit understanding what it is that they think is going on, which is quite useful in this world right now because a lot of different people think a lot of different things are going on. You can think whatever you want to think is going on, but whatever you think is going on, it's definitely not what another person on the street thinks is going on. So I consider understanding conspiracy theories that are popular at this moment to be a good way to understand some of the populace of the people on this planet Earth, and also understand what it is they're thinking about, what it is they're so concerned about. Um, and at that point, like if you want to like talk to a person and make them see reason or whatever, like it depends. They could be talking to you about the P2 conspiracy, which actually happened. Um, they could talk to you about how Picasso actually won't tell you which of his paintings were real, and which of them were fake, because he cares about counterfeit art less than counterfeiters do. Um, there are all kinds of real weird things that have happened involving people who have colluded with each other to make it happen. That's just what history is sometimes. It's people working in groups. So let's talk about the definition of a conspiracy theory, because this ties directly to it. A conspiracy theory is a theory involving a conspiracy. Usually it's a theory about a conspiracy. And I think this is the place where people get kind of disjointed, because usually when they say conspiracy, they mean cover up. A cover up is completely different than a conspiracy, although a conspiracy often involves either a cover up or some sort of subterfuge. Subtleness. Subtle subterfuge. A conspiracy means that people are working together in secret. The cover up would basically be the part where they keep it secret after the fact. Like a cover up means that after something happened, you cover it back up. So that's just like a part of whatever it is that the theory will be about. And of course, conspiracy theory. This is a theory. One of the important parts of theory is that it's not true. Now, I don't want to call this the same as scientific theory, because then we're going to get way deep into semantics, because in scientific theory there's like actual criteria for what makes something a theory and what kind of testing you can do on it and when it stops being a theory, or for instance, like why it will always have to remain a theory when it comes to certain theories. That, like, sometimes the definition of a theory is that it cannot be proven. So with conspiracy theories, you'll find that that's often the case. It's very, very common to find conspiracy theories that cannot be proven. Usually they're framed in such a way that it would be impossible. And that's often where you find the wishful thinking element of them. And sometimes the con man aspect. Some conspiracy theories are created by people on purpose to trick other people. And when I say some, by the way, I am not saying that it's most, or that it's not very many. It's just some of them. I have no idea how many conspiracy theories are cooked up by people on purpose, but I think that there are quite a lot of them. Again, some, a significant portion, that simply organically form out of the ether. It's very easy for human consciousness to produce explanations for things that go on and for them to catch on and become mimetic. It's one way that we kind of comfort each other and give each other solidarity. So, conspiracy theory. Conspiracy means people are working together in secret to make something happen. The theory means that this is what we think. We think that somebody is colluding on something. And we don't have any proof. Now, that's kind of how I would ideally define conspiracy theory, but a lot of ideas that call themselves conspiracy theories often either insist that they do have proof, but no one will accept the proof, or they claim that proof would be possible if it weren't for the cover-up. Some kind of permutation of that. And there's often a lot of injustice kind of feelings that are put upon this that are it's very easy to see how somebody would relate to this issue when it comes to injustice that's happening in their own life. This is another place where conspiracy theories can be dangerous. The thing about a conspiracy theory, especially in modern day, is it kind of makes you want to believe in it. Now, for an example conspiracy theory, I'm going to go ahead and just use the JFK assassination conspiracy theory because I think that would probably be the least offensive and also the most well-known conspiracy theory to use as an example. So, with the JFK conspiracy theory, the theory is that Lee Harvey Oswald was not a lone agent, and instead there was some group of people, probably involving the government, but maybe just involving the mafia or some other outside groups, who worked together to orchestrate the assassination of the American president and frame Lee Harvey Oswald for doing it. This famously went to trial. Jim Garrison, the district attorney of New Orleans at the time, he brought it to trial several years later. He managed to find someone who he thought was a collaborator in the conspiracy, Bernard Shaw. Clay Bertrand? No, yes, Clay Bertrand, sorry. Don't know why I said Bernard Shaw. Clay Bertrand, a.k.a. Clay Shaw. He brought him to trial, and Shaw was found innocent. So after that, we really didn't have much closure. There was a sealing of government records up into, we got to it a few years ago. We were supposed to unseal the records, and then they said, nope, keep them sealed. I think sometime in the 30s of this century, they're supposed to unseal everything, but I think that Congress might have made an act to make that happen faster. The fact that I have to go through this much deliberation to figure out what happened with the JFK conspiracy theory documents, assassination documents, gives you an idea of why there's so many conspiracy theories around JFK's assassination. If they'd simply come out with the documents by now, I think a lot less people would be talking about this at this point. But there's still more to know, and still more things that have been hidden. There's still an active component of this that is driving people, and so they're going to keep following this until either it finally ends or they die. I mean, there's plenty of people who have followed the JFK assassination theories, and they've died before anything has really come out. And that's just an example of just how long it's gone on. So just that kind of mystery. I mean, that's the ultimate true crime podcast, right? That's what America loves. So it's very easy to understand why somebody would be intensely into this conspiracy theory. And with the JFK conspiracy theory, it's kind of hard to see how that would actually draw you in. What happens is that whatever groups are being purported to be responsible for the JFK conspiracy theory are often being given responsibility for like causing the imminent end of the world in modern day. So basically, whoever caused JFK's death is now active and is going to burn all the oil and turn it into wood. Look, I don't know. Somebody probably believes it. So the dangerous part where it makes you want to believe it is the alternate explanations in the JFK conspiracy theory are that, hey, Lee Harvey Oswald didn't work alone, and it was either the mafia or it was CIA, aka our own government. The thing about that is that has a kernel of, oh no, what if our own government is working against us and is still working against us? What if the people who did that are still in power, or the people who, they trained are still in power, or whatever? What if there's they talk about the deep state stuff right now, and so the thing is, because of the JFK assassination, you have kind of some ammo to put behind that idea, that what if idea. And that what if idea, it can be fed and grown in someone's head until it starts to take over their reality. Because it should just stay as a what if. That might happen. That might be true. That's a maybe. But the difficulty is whenever you treat a maybe or a hypothetical as a certainty, when you treat it as fact. If you treat it as fact, then you're not allowing for the possibility that it may still be false. It may be proven false at some point. If you've already accepted it as fact, at the point that you find out it's been proven false, your head's gonna flip over. You're gonna have to do something in your brain to deal with it. And a lot of people, whenever they're confronted with what is actually the truth about reality, they just lash out and say, no, you're wrong. This has got to be true. And the reason why they're so attached to it is that there's probably something else that made them want to believe it as well. For instance, if you've suffered any kind of mistreatment under the government, it is a lot easier to believe in the JFK conspiracy theory that the CIA did it, or that another branch of the government did it, because you already have a reason to distrust the government. And so not only does this sort of give you justification for your feelings, it mollifies a person. It feeds the feelings. It says, hey, no, you're right. You're actually right, and these feelings are justified. The theory also kind of starts to give them the idea that maybe this is the explanation for everything. Maybe every time something goes wrong, it's actually CIA that did it. Maybe CIA is actually stalking me and making other things happen in my life, which I know they have the power to do it. They killed JFK. That's where it starts to become dangerous, because you let the theory drive the active forces in your life. And this can happen with many things besides conspiracy theories. This can happen with any kind of idea. Conspiracy theories commonly have this in them, because conspiracy theories are typically about, well, what if there's someone who's controlling the information in reality in some way? And there are only so many different types of people who can control the information in reality in some way. Either you're going to think of someone who would have the ability to do that somewhat, such as, say, the Pentagon, or you'll think of a group that doesn't actually have the ability to do that, but for some reason, to you, seems like they could now. This is like where people take the responsibility for all kinds of atrocious things that obviously in history you can see were the fault of insert person here or insert thing here, and someone's like, well, now I'm going to blame it on the Jews. And it's like, that's not logical. It's not fair. And I've seen so many ways in which people have made convoluted constructs trying to justify how a group of people they dislike did this. And often it is Jewish people. And I I could go into the history of anti-Semitism in conspiracy theories um, for quite a while, but basically, there have been quite a lot of Gentiles in power who have tried to claim that Jews were to blame for their problems. And they contorted into being any number of just completely twisted realities to say, okay, well, it's because they control all of the banks. It's like, really? They control all the banks? Even the one down the street? Are you sure? Like, there's this fantasy element of it must be because there's someone who's wrong and they're in charge and they're doing bad things. And if we only just make that be revealed, then everything will be better. The fantasy really can be summed up with if only. Just if only. There's always this future that will never really come, but would be so great if you could get there, this ideal. And it's like it simplifies itself by attaching often to a group of people or to just a simple concept. Like, you can basically blame all the bad things on this one thing, and then you'll feel better. So that's really dangerous because it means that not only are you taking this one group, this one person, this concept, whichever, and you're pinning a bunch of blame on them that they don't deserve for things that they never did, treating them very badly, ostracizing them, making things more dangerous for them in life. That's one bad thing that happens from this. But the other thing that happens is inside your own head, you're now no longer going to be going through reality in a way that's going to be the most helpful for you. It is possible to believe in a reality that just doesn't exist. And you'll start seeing things and intaking information in a way that just fits into that if you're not careful about how you take in information and how you think about it. So let's talk about how to take in that information and filter it to where you understand what it's doing in your head and what's driving your actions and thoughts. Because it can be very easy to forget basic fact whenever you're in a heightened emotional state or whenever you've been misled about other facts. So let's take a look at reality and how we can sort it out. The thing about conspiracy theories is they basically have you build an alternate reality. It's like, okay, I know that in this reality, the government says that Lee Harvey Oswald did it and that's it. But what if I told you about an alternate reality? And in that reality, it wasn't Lee Harvey Oswald. He was just a patsy. Instead, it was actually CIA and the mafia working together in collusion so they wouldn't have to deal with JFK anymore and they could slam as many missiles into Russia as they wanted. Wouldn't that be great? Imagine that alternate reality where, like, they're kind of driven to do that. And it would probably drive some kind of, like, post JFK war economy where they, like, invade Vietnam, and then there's like a civil war in Vietnam, and they like probably like take that into neighboring countries, and then there's like a Cold War that builds up around that. Yeah, I know it sounds familiar. It's because it's actually our reality, the alternate reality, where JFK was killed by a collusion of CIA and the mafia is actually our reality. And so not every conspiracy theory will be talked about like that, not so clearly, but it's often how it's presented. It's like, hey, what if this thing here? Well, actually, you see this thing here, and you see your reality? This thing here is your reality. And that's the simple thing that can happen in your brain if you don't intake information correctly. Often, you can actually accidentally do this in your head, and the person who is giving you information or the place you're getting information from did not intend for this to happen to you. Sometimes they may be somewhat aware that they kind of confuse people and get them to act a bit erratically, but they may not realize the full implications of what that could cause. In this day and age, you can see quite a lot of people who've been radicalized in all sorts of ways, and sometimes it's hard to tell which was intended or not. But what if we could look at reality, and instead of taking it in and taking this one in and accidentally swapping one for the other and ending up in the wrong reality, we kept track of which one we were taking in, and we put it over here and it stays over there and we label it. That's basically what I'm proposing. Also, I propose that you don't just keep 2 realities in your head. Start with 3. From there, just go with whatever it is that's easy to think about. And by the way, this is going to turn into a kind of mind mapping. Like, you could easily just like map this out on an index card or something to organize information. It's a pretty simple technique. I just call it the bucket system. So the 3 bucket system is where you start. Your first bucket is just regular reality that you experience all the time. That's a bucket you're using all the time. It's kind of like what you already have there already. It's like, hey, take everything you've already got, boom. That's the reality you're always experiencing all the time. Cool. Now, by the way, we're not going to work this Venn diagram style. You can have a separate bucket that has the same information in it as this bucket over here. You can have like kind of a duplicate copy. So they're not exclusive. You don't have to say that this thing belongs only in regular reality and this one belongs only in this other reality. This bucket over here can have some of the same information as this bucket over here. Just, this is a way of thinking about things. So you're not limited by resources. It's all in your head. 1 bucket, regular reality. Okay. Your second bucket is where you're going to put kind of all the information that comes in about the conspiracy theory. Everything, like, you know, every name, it's like this is an actual person that you've heard of who actually did the thing they're talking about, still goes into this bucket. If it's still a regular fact, it still goes into this bucket. Now, if it's a regular fact you already knew and it's already in your reality bucket, that's okay. Keep it in there. That one's in your reality bucket and it's in your conspiracy theory bucket. It's in both those places. At some point, your brain will start being able to keep track of which ones are in both and which ones might be in several of them, depending on how many buckets you have. And you'll start to see kind of correlations and connections where you may not have before. You're basically able to like compare larger, more complex things because you have a place to keep them. So keep the conspiracy theory in its own bucket. By the way, if you ever learn a new conspiracy theory or you hear about another conspiracy theory in like the next 5 minutes or whatever, that should go in a new bucket. You should not have a bucket of conspiracy theories. I've tried this one, by the way. I've tried evaluating a bunch of different conspiracy theories to see if they all have commonalities. And the problem is that they do and they don't. It just really depends on who wrote it, who participated, how it came about, what it's about. But there's really no good like conspiracy theory bucket that holds them all. You should just keep them separately because they all have their own special fine-tuned things anyway. So, got to keep all those variants separate. They're all different isotopes. They're totally different. So then you're going to have another bucket. This bucket's going to be doing a different job than the first 2 entirely. Whenever you get something about this conspiracy theory, something from this new conspiracy theory, and you're like, I know that's an actual fact. I know that's true. Either your logic tells you that it's definitely true, or you remember it being true. This needs to be pretty unambiguous. Things like, oh, you heard that a celebrity did visit that location on that date. It's something that you saw in the news. So it's like, Michael Jackson raises the dead in Beverly Hills in 1999. That's the conspiracy theory. Well, in your other bucket over here of things that you know are true from this conspiracy theory, You have the fact that you know that Michael Jackson was in Beverly Hills in 1999 in the location they're talking about. Now you have no evidence and really no knowledge of whether he was raising the dead in that location, but you do know that he was here in Beverly Hills. And so you put it in this bucket, facts from this conspiracy theory. And of course, if these are facts that you already know, or like for instance, something's asserted in the conspiracy theory that you're like, okay, no, I can believe that, I won't argue with that. It's probably just a repetition of basic fact that you already knew. Like, that's already in your reality bucket. So again, duplicate information. It can exist in all three. But it's useful to have these different categories. It's useful to have, like, okay, what's true in this conspiracy theory? Well, if you kind of sorted, like paid attention to all the details that you found to be true or that you think are true, or even just details like, you know, what's interesting about this conspiracy theory or what's weird about this conspiracy theory. You put each of those in their own bucket. And so whenever you think like, what are the weird things about this conspiracy theory? That bucket kind of has everything you need in it already. And if there's anything else that is information that should belong there, it'll usually start kind of magneting into there. Like information kind of attracts like. So you'll find that that bucket might actually get more details over time as you take them in without you having to really actively keep it up. What you're doing is you're just like organizing your thoughts as they come in a sensible manner that allows it to grow. Because these are all mental constructs and because the brain works pretty automatically, you don't have to really think of like, you know, oh, well, I got to build a shelf in my brain to put all the buckets on now, and I got to make a system that alphabetizes the buckets. Like, you don't have to do that. The brain will find the bucket automatically because the bucket is just a thought concept, and so it's like it's not the Dewey Decimal System. You have infinite buckets. Congratulations! You've won at the Stanley Parable. The best reality. So in your bucket system, as you listen to a conspiracy theory, you want to like kind of sort out the things that are real, reasonable. Like I could go with that, put them in their own bucket. And you've got the original conspiracy theory; it's its own bucket of, you know, facts and fish heads. And then you've got regular reality, its own big mess. Now, whenever you think, what was in this conspiracy theory? If you get confused by the bucket that has the conspiracy theory in it, then you can go to the facts thing. You're like, okay, I had that. Those are all things that I know are fact. Now, what if you want to think about, like, you know, everything that was wacky about the conspiracy theory? Then you're going to have to, like, kind of think through the original conspiracy theory bucket and sort out, like, okay, what in there is wacky? Okay, it goes in this bucket. But at some point, you'll be able to think of this in a way that doesn't bring up all the very complex, very kind of the conspiracy theory itself. It's going to have a lot of weird stuff in it that might trigger stuff in your head automatically depending on what it is and what it's about. But your buckets will be much less likely to have that material. So you kind of refer to those whenever you're just kind of lightly thinking about the thing. This really helps whenever it gets to very complicated conspiracy theories or very racist ones, because it just kind of hurts to like think racist things or even think of racist things sometimes. But it's important to know that they exist. It's important to know what someone said about someone, even if it was hurtful. This is a way that you can kind of store it without activating your emotions about it. It's basically kind of being a little bit more careful about curating the information that's in your own brain so that it can retrieve that information more easily for you without causing other problems at the same time. So honestly, it's a way to think about anything. I find it very useful for conspiracy theories because, like, at a certain point, I got this book. I think I was like 17 or 18. Let's see when it came out. I mean, it's obviously pretty beat up by now. I brought it basically everywhere. 1998. So it's like 24 years old. I read through this entire book wondering if there was anything in here that was true. And there is some stuff in here that's true because it's about like, you know, cover-ups and cults. Like none of that implies that it's not true. It's just the nature of the information means that you're going to have some obfuscation in it. And there's like an interesting article in here about Timothy Leary. That's going to be fact. There was lots of stuff that happened involving Timothy Leary and his um experiments with LSD, and like that's going to be there in history. So what it does though is it puts all the connected articles at the bottom, like it cross references them. So I would go through and just like find an article at the bottom and be like, oh, what about that? And I'll go over there and read about that. And I'll go over here and read about that. And I mean, it was like Wikipedia before there was Wikipedia, to be honest. I loved it. But a lot of the information I was getting, I was like, that's weird, or that's racist, or that's just not something that I think could or would happen. Like I understand why somebody would want to believe it, but I don't think that that's necessarily credible. And I found that because the author Robert Anton Wilson in this book actually talks about like, hey, you know, this conspiracy theory is pretty out there, and there's a whole bunch of stuff that they claim, and obviously it's not true. Here's actually what's going on, and here's the things that actually happened in history when it came to that thing, and here's what happened involving that incident. So it's kind of like a documentary of conspiracy theories as opposed to like being really into it. So it really helped me think through these complex issues without kind of falling down the rabbit hole. Um, I guess whenever you've got these different points of information in your head, like you've got this angle, you've got this other angle, you've got this other angle, you can look at something from different angles. That's called being objective. And the more objective that you can be, the less likely that you're going to get sucked into something and completely overcome by it. Which, like, again, that's the real danger. It's not about a certain piece of information gets into your head and then it destroys everything. So you've got to always fight that one piece of information and never let it in. It's about making sure that whatever comes into your head doesn't overwhelm you so much that you stop acting based on your own logic. The biggest danger with conspiracy theories is that they often have an emotional touchstone or a personal connection that makes it really hard to let go of the theory. And I actually found this several times because whenever I was reading about the conspiracy theories, I was very interested in, for instance, Holy Blood, Holy Grail. I actually read this book before the Da Vinci Code came out. So whenever the Da Vinci Code came out, I was like, oh yeah, I know all about this. It's in the conspiracy theory book. What, this is a big thing now? Everybody's talking about it now? So, like, the idea that there is a living descendant of Jesus Christ and that the Holy Grail is actually a symbol for Jesus's wife Mary Magdalene, who like survived and carried on his secret church. It's very alluring, especially for anyone who's been disenchanted with Christianity or any other kind of religion. It's a very alluring idea, and it brings up a lot of issues that are like often activate themselves whenever someone who's from various demographics reads the Bible. Like, it's a very validating theory. Unfortunately, we have no means of establishing its truth, and it's also a political construct in its own way because it's kind of an active piece of narrative engaging against the Vatican, who has actively engaged against it in response several times and still does. So since it's part of an active political narrative, it wants to implant itself in your head and drag you along with it. You don't want that. It's too much trouble. So When it came to the Holy Blood, Holy Grail stuff, I was like, that's really interesting, but I think I'm gonna let go of my attachment to it because um, I don't think that it's going to really be a payoff trying to put a horse in this race, as it were. Um, and sometimes this can actually enter the realm of archaeology. You've got the Ancient Aliens show for one. You've got lots and lots of different theories about different ancient groups and whatever religions it is that they followed at the time. Seen lots of different theories about Asatru and Vanir, um, like the Norse deities, and then the Vanik deities. If you know about those, it's kind of like the proto elves. Um, there's lots of different theories about how they came about and what what happened to the people who worshipped them and what happened during the changeover of the years from one religion to the other, one religion variant to the other variant. And some of those theories validate some people's personal religious traditions. Some of those theories invalidate their personal religious traditions, depending upon what the beliefs are in those traditions. And so I've seen various people theorizing on which archaeological finds are valid based on which find they like best that backs up their faith best. Sometimes I'll see people trying to kind of debunk archaeology because they feel like they've got skin in the game. And I think that the biggest lesson with conspiracy theories is don't confuse yourself and think that you've got skin in the game. A conspiracy theory is a fantasy. In the end, it has to be a fantasy because it's still a theory, and therefore it's not known, established fact. So you have to take the part of that you know is the biggest fantasy. Often it's the biggest fantasy is usually it's all this group's fault, and if only someone would do something about them, everything would be okay. Usually, that's the biggest fantasy of all in a conspiracy theory, and it's the most dangerous part of it. It's the part that takes the blame for something and puts it somewhere else. And it always puts it somewhere else that the creator of the theory kind of wants it to be, which is really unfair. It's like finding somebody to pick on. So, if you see that a conspiracy theory is basically bullying a certain group, which often they are bullying Jewish people, conspiracy theories are often so anti Semitic, and they have been for centuries, if not longer. They're always picking on one group or another. If not Jewish people, then someone else. So be aware when you are taking in conspiracy theories that they are sometimes the most wishful thinking. And whatever you find in them that's useful is often going to be an understanding of how other people think and an understanding of what it is that they believe and why. It can be very important to gain this understanding. I think a good example would be Ruby Ridge. Ruby Ridge is an actual, like, Ruby Ridge was a place that got basically assaulted by government operatives, like armed government operatives. I don't know. I think they were FBI. And it was because of confusion and misperception where they believed that these people were an armed militia, and they absolutely were not. And the people who went through what happened went through something atrocious. Like the people who actually survived it, they went through something completely, utterly atrocious that they've never really received justice for. All the people who lived around there, they bore witness to that, so they knew the truth of that. So, like, that established a foundation. Now Ruby Ridge is like a flag that gathers people around when it comes to issues about conspiracy theories involving the government, because it's kind of like that grain of truth. Um, Something happened there. And so gaining an understanding of what actually happened at Ruby Ridge, understanding the facts, helps you get the empathy and the understanding for people who actually went through things, and people who are actually very angry for the people who went through things. That these are real things that happened, and these are real wrongs that were committed. People who get worked up over Ruby Ridge, often they'll be led to another theory by someone else who's like, oh, you're mad about Ruby Ridge? Well, they did this thing too. And that thing will be totally false. But if they already got worked up over Ruby Ridge and they're maybe a little drunk or something, they might believe this other thing. It's like kind of a gateway drug for conspiracy theories. So it's important to know what happened at Ruby Ridge. I suggest you look it up, you do some research, look up what happened at Ruby Ridge, look up what happened at, like, in things like Jonestown, which is not a similar incident in terms of who did it or whatever, but it's another like thing that you really should be aware of if you want to understand like how cults think. Um, Understanding how other people think and why they think that way gives you a lot of ability to communicate with them, because like otherwise what's the point? It's not about diffusing people like they're a bomb. It's about understanding them like they're other people, which they are. um Also, a lot of conspiracy theories are not labeled as conspiracy theories, so it's not like you can just avoid conspiracy theories all times. You're not going to find out until about 3 paragraphs in that some things are a conspiracy theory. That's when things take a little turn sometimes. And maybe you don't find out until like, way to the end. It's like, oh, this is not an established truth. This is actually a theory. This is somebody's idea of what might have happened, and it's getting a little edgy. Um, it's not that you need to avoid learning about them or reading them or taking them in at all costs. It's that if you do want to take that information in, you need to know what to do with it so that it actually serves you instead of harming you or other people. I'd say that's the same with pretty much any information. It's a really important lesson that I learned whenever reading anything about the occult or psychic or psychological stuff. It's actually been a really helpful tool to be able to deal with the intake of a lot of different information, because at all times it's really important to ask the question, the person who's telling me this information, do they believe this information? Why do they believe this information? Do they want me to believe this information? Are they trying to get me to believe this information on purpose? And are they trying to do it maliciously or for some other reason? Like, these are all important questions to ask. Not all the time, because it would get tedious if you're trying to just like order food at a restaurant. What is this waiter's hidden agenda? But when you're taking in information from someone about what they believe, and it seems like they're trying to either convince you that it's true or get you to believe it, then it really behooves you to think, okay, why are they so attached to this? Why are they so driven by this? Whether or not a person is truly believes what is happening, or truly believes in a concept, is in no way related to how true the concept actually is. Someone can be led to believe pretty much anything, depending on the circumstances and depending on how their mind works. But understanding that someone has a very strong emotional attachment involved in their beliefs is essential in being able to communicate with that person and to get anywhere with them. And showing that you value their emotional attachments, that you value what it is that they are valuing so much, that you respect that they value this thing, at least I would say, is a good way to start if you need a place to begin with somebody who's in a difficult place mentally. So, um, just want to show this book again. Everything is Under Control: Conspiracies, Cults, and Cover-Ups by Robert Anton Wilson. If you can track it down, get it. It's a great book. Because it's from 1998, it's from a different political time. And I I think that um, it's a really good look at history, because at this time you still had a lot of people who were talking about like kind of the old 60s to 70s stuff. Around the 2000s, you get most people are starting to talk about like the digital era, and this stuff gets, I'm not going to say kind of forgotten, but it's either overlooked or it's woven into the new stuff in a way that doesn't really uh, strike me as a great idea. So I want to leave you with this. It's an entry that Robert Anton Wilson wrote on a, let's see, was it a book, I believe? Yes, a book called Demonic Reality. So here's where he talks about it. Demonic Reality by Patrick Harpur examines UFOs and a wide variety of paranormal phenomena from a rather unique angle. Although Harpur never fully defines the demonic that can be defined is not the true demonic, as Lao Tse would say. It seems to exist both inside us and outside us. Like the Greek demon and unlike the Christian demon, it takes both good healing and bad terrifying forms, depending on our commitment to rationalistic ego states. In a sense, the demonic is like the collective unconscious of Carl Jung, inside us as a part of our total self that the ego wishes to deny, outside us in all the other humans who ever existed and in the dreams, myths, and arts of all the world. But Harpur follows Irish poet and Golden Dawn alumnus W.B. Yeats as often as he follows Jung and traces some of his ideas back to Giordano Bruno and the alchemical and hermetic mystics of the Renaissance. The demonic is just a bit more personalized and individualized than Jung's species unconscious. Harpur's major thesis is that unless we recognize the demonic, make friends with it, Jung would say, it takes increasingly malignant and terrifying forms. For instance, the Greys of UFO abduction lore, he says, are deliberately mirroring our ego-centered and scientistic age, showing no emotions of the humans they experiment upon, just as the ideal science student feels no emotion and has no concern with the emotions of the animal being tortured in his laboratory. Despite dealing with many subjects common to conspiracy theories, this book does not quite fit into that category. We are the conspirators, so to speak. We have repressed the most creative part of ourselves, and now it is escaping in terrifying forms. And I think that is the major danger of conspiracy theories. They are an outlet for this part of us that wants to be free and to fly into a fantasy space where everything is possible and everything can be real. And unfortunately, that's not the same bucket as regular reality that we live in all the time, and we need to keep up for the sake of our health and the well-being of others. So keep track of where your feet are. Keep track of where your head is. Remember, they're both connected. Don't get lost in the fantasy. Remember your buckets. Remember, it's all in your head. And stay cool.